The wind screamed across the open plains of Montana, sharp as broken glass and twice as cruel. It tore through Clara Whitmore's wool traveling cloak as the wagon train groaned over another frozen rut. She pulled the heavy fabric tighter, but the cold didn't care. It slid into her bones like a thief, stealing every ounce of warmth she had left. Through a slit in the canvas, she could see nothing but white. Endless, merciless snow. For 3 long weeks, this had been her world, a frozen ocean stretching toward nowhere. She tried not to think of Boston, with its gaslit parlors and soft laughter. That life had ended the day her father found the letters. "Won't be much longer now, miss," shouted Jeremiah, the lead driver, his voice barely carrying over the howl of the wind. 2 more days, maybe 3 if this weather holds. Clara nodded, though he couldn't see her. 2 more days until she reached the Double Bar Ranch. 2 more days until she met Thomas Hartley, the man chosen to be her husband, the man her father said would save the family's good name, all because of one mistake, one foolish, desperate love with a carpenter's apprentice named Michael. The memory still stung. His rough hands, his kind eyes, the soft poems he'd written her in secret. She'd hidden them beneath her mattress until her mother found them. Then came her father's rage, the threats, the shame. The whispers that followed her through Boston society. The Whitmore girl caught with a common laborer. Now she was being sent west to marry a stranger. To start over. To be forgotten. The wagon suddenly jolted to a stop, throwing Clara against the wooden side. Outside, voices rose. Sharp, urgent. The horses whinnied in panic. Clara's heart began to pound. She pushed aside the canvas flap, just enough to see. Riders, at least a dozen of them. They came over the ridge like shadows moving through the storm. Dark shapes against the white horizon. Even from this distance, Clara knew they weren't ranch hands or cavalry. The painted faces, the rifles glinting in the pale sun. Lakota warriors. "Stay inside!" Jeremiah's voice cracked. "Don't move, don't make a sound." But it was already too late. The first shot rang out, echoing across the valley. Horses screamed. The attack came fast, chaos exploding in every direction. Arrows cut through the wind like black lightning. Gunfire roared in reply. Clara clamped her hands over her ears as the air filled with smoke and the metallic scent of blood on snow. Someone shouted her name. Maybe Jeremiah. Maybe one of the guards. Then another scream. Higher, younger. She saw Billy, the 16-year-old scout, fall from his horse, an arrow jutting from his shoulder. Without thinking, Clara threw open the wagon flap and ran into the storm. "Miss Whitmore, no!" someone yelled, but she didn't stop. Her skirts tangled around her legs, her boots sank in the snow, but she kept moving toward the boy. She never reached him. A shadow loomed in front of her, tall, silent, powerful. The warrior's face was streaked with red and black paint, his eyes dark as storm clouds. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. He raised his rifle, and Clara's breath caught in her throat. This was how it ended. In the snow, in the middle of nowhere, her name lost to the wind. But the shot never came. The warrior hesitated. His gaze locked on hers. Not cruel, not gloating, but searching. Then he barked something in his own language to the men behind him. A brief argument followed, harsh and fast. Whatever he said decided it. Rough hands grabbed her arms, binding her wrists with rawhide. Clara's world spun as they pulled her away. The battle was already over. The wagons burned. The guards lay motionless in the snow, their blood staining the white ground crimson. Even Billy was still now, his face turned toward the gray sky. The warrior mounted a horse and pulled her up in front of him. She felt his arm around her waist, iron strong, holding her steady as they rode through the storm. She could smell leather, smoke, and something wild that made her heart race for reasons she didn't understand. Hours later, the Lakota camp came into view, a circle of teepees rising from the snow-covered valley, smoke curling into the gray sky. Women and children appeared, watching the warriors return. Their eyes followed Clara, some with curiosity, others with open hatred. An older woman stepped forward, her voice sharp, angry. She spoke to the warrior, the one who'd spared Clara. They argued fiercely until finally the woman spat on the ground and walked away. The warrior dismounted first, then helped Clara down. Her legs were numb, her body shaking from cold and fear. When she stumbled, he caught her, gentle, steady, his hand firm around her arm. He led her to a teepee apart from the others. Inside, the air was warm from a small fire. The floor was covered in buffalo hides, soft under her boots. He motioned for her to sit, then left without a word. Clara sat by the fire, her hands still bound. The heat stung her frozen fingers. She stared at the flames, trying not to cry. She was a prisoner among people her family called savages, and yet they hadn't killed her. When the warrior returned, he carried a wooden bowl filled with steaming stew. He set it before her, then drew a knife. Clara flinched, heart racing, but he only cut her bonds. "Eat," he said in rough English. She hesitated. "Thank you," she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment, eyes unreadable. Then he spoke again, slow and measured. "You are worth more alive. For trade." Clara's stomach twisted. Of course, she was a prize to barter, not a person. "The others wanted you dead," he continued. "I said white woman bring many goods, flour, medicine." "So I'm to be sold," she said bitterly. He tilted his head slightly. "Traded," he corrected. "When snow stops." "And if it doesn't?" she asked. He looked toward the flap of the teepee, where snow still fell thick and heavy. "Then you wait." As if to prove his point, the wind howled louder, rattling the hides of the shelter. Clara looked up at him again, and for the first time she saw something other than her captor. There was weariness in his face, and something deeper. Something she didn't yet understand. He stepped toward the entrance. "You stay here, my lodge. You safe?" "Your lodge?" she asked, startled. He turned back, his voice low but firm. "Yes, I have place with cousin. Do not run. Storm will kill you faster than any warrior." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the fire, the storm, and a fear she could no longer tell apart from fascination. Outside, the blizzard raged, howling like a living thing. Inside, Clara pulled the buffalo robe around her shoulders and whispered to herself to stay alive until the storm passed. But deep down, some quiet voice wondered if her life hadn't already changed forever the moment that Lakota warrior lowered his rifle. The blizzard didn't end that night. It raged for 3 long days, a wall of white that buried the world outside. Inside the teepee, Clara Whitmore sat close to the fire, wrapped in buffalo robes that smelled faintly of smoke and leather. The fear that had clutched her heart that first night slowly dulled into something quieter, something she didn't have a name for yet. The man who had spared her, Taza, she had heard one of the others call him, came twice each day. He never spoke more than a few words, but his presence filled the space like the steady beat of a drum. He brought her food, added wood to the fire, and then disappeared again into the storm. Clara watched him carefully when he came. He moved differently than any man she had ever known, all silent strength and calm grace. He didn't stomp or rush. He flowed, like part of the land itself. On the 4th morning, she woke to find him already there, crouched by the fire, adding more wood. The storm still raged outside. She sat up slowly, clutching the robe tighter around her. "The snow," she said softly, her voice rough from days of silence. "How long will it last?" Taza looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Many days, maybe many weeks. This is angry winter. And I'm to stay here, alone?" "Better alone than with those who want you dead," he said simply. His English was rough, but the meaning was clear. Later that day, a woman entered the teepee. She was close to Clara's age, her face kind but cautious. She carried a folded bundle of deerskin clothing and gestured for Clara to stand. The message was clear. Her torn traveling dress marked her too easily as an outsider. The woman introduced herself slowly, pointing to her chest. Winona. Clara, she said, touching her own chest in return. Winona smiled faintly, then helped her change. The deerskin dress was soft and surprisingly warm. The leggings fitted snugly. When Clara saw herself in the reflection of a small bronze bowl filled with water, she barely recognized the woman staring back. "Come," Winona said, beckoning her outside. The cold hit Clara like a slap, but the storm had finally quieted to a steady snowfall. The camp was alive now. Smoke curled from the teepees. Children played in the snow, and the air was filled with the rhythmic sounds of people working, scraping hides, tending fires, caring for the horses. Everywhere she looked, people turned to stare, some with open hostility, others with simple curiosity. Winona stayed close, guiding her through the camp, showing her how they lived. The Lakota weren't the monsters she'd been taught to fear. They were families, living, laughing, surviving together in a world that didn't want them to. That evening, when Taza brought her food, Clara spoke first. "Thank you," she said, gesturing to the clothing and the walk through camp, "and for letting me see." Taza settled across the fire, watching her. "You think we are animals?" he asked quietly. "All white people think this." Clara hesitated. She wanted to deny it, but she had thought exactly that once. "I was wrong," she admitted. He studied her for a long moment, then said, "Your people come to our land, take, build, push us away. When we fight, we are savage. When you kill us, you are," he paused, searching for the word, "righteous." The words hit her harder than any bullet. She had seen those same headlines in the Boston newspapers. Hostiles attack wagon train. Brave soldiers defend civilization. She looked down at her hands. The boy who died in the convoy, Billy, he was only 16. Taza's voice was steady, but his eyes darkened. "My sister was 14. Soldiers came to our summer camp 2 winters ago, said we stole horses. They killed her when she tried to save her pony." Quote. The fire crackled between them, filling the silence that followed. Clara's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry changes nothing." "No," she said softly, "but I'm still sorry." They sat in silence for a long time after that. Days passed, then weeks. The storm never quite ended. It just changed its face, turning from snow to mist, from cold to a gray stillness that wrapped the valley like a secret. Clara learned from Winona how to help with small tasks, scraping hides, grinding corn, fetching water. Slowly, the others began to see her less as an intruder and more as a strange sort of guest. Every night, Taza came to check the fire. Sometimes he stayed longer, and they talked, haltingly at first, then more easily. His English grew smoother with practice. Her fear faded with each passing day. He told her stories of the buffalo hunts, of his people's traditions, of the spirits that watched over the plains. She listened like a child, entranced by the rhythm of his voice. When he spoke of what the white settlers had done, the broken treaties, the sickness, the stolen land, Clara felt shame burn inside her. "You could leave," she said one night. "Go farther west, start again." Taza shook his head. "We were many once, now we are few. You cannot run from the wind. It finds you everywhere." Clara looked at him across the fire, his face half lit by flame. He wasn't the savage she'd been told about in Boston. He was proud, wounded, human, and she was beginning to see him not as her captor, but as the only person who had truly seen her since she'd left home. She found herself watching him more closely. The way his hands moved when he worked, the way his voice softened when he spoke to the children who ran past the teepee. Sometimes, when he caught her looking, he didn't look away right away. Something unspoken hung between them, a fragile thing neither dared name. One night, Clara woke from a dream, or maybe a memory, with tears on her face. The fire had burned low, and the teepee was filled with shadows. Then she felt a presence beside her. Taza knelt quietly, adding wood to the fire. When he looked up, their eyes met. "You dream," he said softly. "You cry." Clara wiped her face. "I dream of home, of what I lost." Home is where your heart rests, Taza said. Maybe your heart does not rest there anymore. His words struck her deeply, because they were true. That night, long after he'd gone, Clara sat awake, listening to the wind outside and realizing how much her world had changed. She was still a captive, but she no longer feared her captor. She waited for his visits. She wanted to hear his voice. She wanted to understand him. And as the firelight danced across the teepee walls, she began to wonder if what she felt was the beginning of something she had been warned all her life could never happen. A love that defied every rule, every line, every boundary drawn by the world she'd left behind. The winter deepened. Weeks passed in quiet rhythm. The fire, the snow, the small sounds of camp life. Clara no longer marked the days. She no longer dreamed of Boston parlors or lace gloves. Her hands were rough now, her skin tanned from the firelight. She felt alive in a way she never had before. Taza still came each night, but something in his presence had changed. The easy talk had faded. His silences were heavier, filled with tension neither of them dared to name. Sometimes, she would glance up from the fire and find his eyes on her, dark and searching, as if he was fighting something inside himself. Then came the night that changed everything. Clara woke to the sound of the storm raging outside, wind howling like a wild animal. She realized the fire had burned low. The cold was cutting through her deerskin clothes. She pulled on her cloak and stepped outside to fetch more wood. The world was white fury. Snow slashed her face, stealing her breath. She took 3 steps before she lost sight of the teepees. Panic gripped her. She turned in circles, unable to tell where the camp ended, and the sky began. The cold bit deep. Her fingers went numb. Then strong hands seized her shoulders. A voice cut through the storm. "Foolish woman!" Taza. He scooped her up like she weighed nothing, carrying her through the blinding snow. She clung to him, her face pressed against his chest. His heartbeat was steady against her cheek, the only solid thing in the world. When he burst back into the teepee, he didn't speak. He tore off her frozen cloak, stripped away her soaked dress with brisk, efficient movements, and wrapped her in buffalo robes. Then he did something that would have shocked Boston society to its core. He stripped down to his leggings and slid beneath the robes beside her, pulling her against him to share his heat. "Don't," she whispered weakly, though she didn't move away. "You die of pride," he muttered, his voice low and rough. "Be still. Get warm." She could feel his heartbeat beneath her palm, the warmth of his skin seeping into hers. Slowly, the shaking stopped. Her hands stopped trembling. The cold retreated, but something else took its place. A heat that had nothing to do with the fire. Taza's breath brushed her ear. "Better?" "Yes," she whispered. "Alive." He didn't move away. Neither did she. The silence between them filled with something dangerous, something beautiful. Clara turned slowly in his arms until she was facing him. The firelight painted his face in gold and shadow. His eyes searched hers, full of the same conflict she felt. "This is not wise," he said, his voice strained. "I know," she whispered, "but I don't care." Her hand rose, trembling to his cheek. His skin was warm beneath her fingertips. "Your people," he began, but the words died when she leaned forward and kissed him. The world fell away. The kiss started gentle, hesitant, as if both were afraid to break the moment. Then it deepened. Taza's control shattered. His hands tangled in her hair. She felt the raw strength in him, the gentleness that followed it. The hunger and restraint tangled together like fire and smoke. He pulled back, breathing hard. "Tell me stop," he said hoarsely. "Tell me no." Clara met his gaze, her heart pounding. "Let me feel you once," she whispered, "before it all ends. Let me know what it is to be truly touched." Something broke inside him. He kissed her again, rougher now, filled with everything they'd both tried to deny. The robes fell away. The storm roared outside, but inside there was only heat. only the sound of their breaths and the beating of two hearts finally finding the same rhythm. When it was over, they lay tangled together beneath the robes. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over their bare shoulders. Clara traced patterns on his chest, her heart full to bursting. "I love you," she said before she could stop herself. Taza closed his eyes, pain flashing across his face. "Do not say this," he murmured, "because it cannot last." "I know," she said quietly, "but it's still true." He cupped her face in both hands. "My heart knew you before my eyes saw you," he said softly, "but dreams end at sunrise." "Then we have tonight," she whispered. They came together again, slower this time, tender, unhurried, a joining not of desperation but of truth. When sleep finally claimed them, they were wrapped around each other, the storm outside powerless against the warmth they had found. But dawn brings reality. When Clara woke, the fire was dying, and the sky beyond the smoke hole had turned pale. The storm had passed. The world outside was clean and bright and cruel. Taza sat by the fire, staring into the flames. His expression was heavy with something she didn't want to name. "I cannot keep you," he said finally, his voice flat. "Spring comes. Soldiers will search. To keep you is to bring war on my people." Clara's throat tightened. "Then let me stay," she whispered. "I'll learn your ways. I'll live as you live." He shook his head. "You would be neither white nor Lakota. No place with either. Always between." She went to him, taking his hands. "Then I'll live between. I'll live anywhere, as long as it's with you." Taza's jaw worked, his eyes filled with anguish. "I cannot do this to you." "You already have," she said, tears spilling over. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "7 days," he murmured. "Snow melts fast now. 7 days until they come, 7 days for us." And those 7 days became their stolen lifetime. They lived quietly, away from the others, as man and woman instead of captor and captive. They cooked together, laughed softly by the fire, spoke of things that would never be. The camp knew, and said nothing. The older women watched with sad understanding. On the 7th morning, the riders appeared on the ridge. Blue uniforms, sunlight glinting off rifles. The soldiers had found them. The camp erupted into motion. Warriors gathered weapons. Mothers clutched children. The air buzzed with fear. Clara's heart pounded as she saw Taza among them, his face painted for battle, his eyes burning. The soldiers came under a white flag. Their officer rode forward, stiff-backed and cold-eyed. "We know you have the white woman," he said. "Return her and we leave in peace." Taza's jaw tightened. He said something to the chief in Lakota. The chief's answer was quiet, proud. "She is not prisoner," the translator shouted. "She stays of her own will." The officer laughed. "No white woman stays with savages by choice." Taza looked at Clara then, the first time since sunrise. "You go by choice?" he asked. The meaning behind the words was clear. He was giving her a way to save them all. If she said no, they would fight and die. If she said yes, she would lose him forever. Clara's heart broke in her chest. She met his eyes, her voice trembling. "Yes," she said, "by choice." Taza's expression shattered for a moment before he masked it again. He stepped forward, pulled the leather cord from his neck, a small silver disc, and pressed it into her palm. "So you remember," he said quietly in Lakota. Then he turned away. He didn't look back. Clara was led to the soldiers. The camp faded behind her, swallowed by the snow. Days later, she sat in a soft bed at a frontier fort, dressed in proper clothes that felt like a costume, staring at the silver disc in her hand. The world said she'd been rescued. But she knew the truth. She hadn't been rescued. She'd been torn away from the only place she had ever truly belonged. And from the man who had shown her that love could be stronger than the world's hate, even if it could never be free.